Hello all, welcome to Embedded Linux Learning Point. In this video, we will learn about Linux Shell. What is Linux Shell? It is a special interactive utility which can be used to interact with the kernel. As you can see in this picture, there is a hardware, and the hardware has access to the kernel has access to hardware, and the kernel is exposing itself to something called shell. So there are different shells that are available. One is KSH, Bash, and CSH, and of course there are many more. Ubuntu or major distributions has Bash as a default shell, and this shell is exposed to the other applications. For example, wget cat, this is a command, pi is an editor, nano is editor. So these are the utilities. So ls, these are all the utilities which basically issue commands to shell, and then the shell interprets those commands. You get things done from the kernel, the OS. So that's what the Linux shell is about. So the core component of the shell is the command prompt, the command line CLI, the command line interface. So what it does is, it's the interactive part of the shell. The command prompt is the interactive part of the shell. You can enter text commands. When you enter these text commands, the command prompt gives this text commands to the shell. So it interprets the commands and issues the commands to the shell, and then shell executes them. So it executes them in the kernel, and you get things done. Linux Shell also provides a way for user to interact with the kernel, as I said before. The way it does is, the user can start a program using the shell. You can manage files on the file system. Things like you can copy, move files, you can delete files, you can create files. Same with the directories, and manage processes. This is where you can start an application or a process. You can kill an application. You can manage those processes. So that's basically can be done using shell. So one of the main ways to interact with the system, as I said, is a command line interface. And the way to access this CLI, the command line interface, is the terminal. So the terminal itself is not a command line interface. This is an application to basically access the shell. There are two types of terminals in Linux. One is the console terminal. What we also call it as Linux console, and this is basically called also as a virtual console. So every time a Linux boots, it actually offers 7 virtual consoles for a user to interact with the system, and you can actually invoke the virtual consoles by key combination of Control plus Alt plus F1 to F7. So Control Alt and F1 gives you the first virtual console. I think that's where you're basically the graphical when the OS boots, basically the way you interact graphically using this, I think the virtual console one, and the F2, with the F2 Control Alt F2, you will be able to access the actual virtual console, where the only way to interact is using commands. You will not have a graphical interface. The next type is the graphical terminals. So these are basically applications which are built to access the CLI within your graphical terminal. So some of the examples are eTerm, Final Term, Genome Terminal, and so on. So there's some other applications. But in Ubuntu, what it offers is the terminal. I think it's the GNOME terminal. That's what comes in the Ubuntu by default. And how do you open a terminal? At least in Ubuntu, the way to do is you go to the show applications, the terminal. So maybe I can do it here. The show applications, you can search for the terminal, and there you go. You have the terminal available for you to use. So I'll list the directories, and pwd is my present working directory. It's in the home directory of the Veerish user. And the other way also use the Alt Control T. So I'm pressing the Control and then Alt and T, which will also give you the new terminal in Ubuntu. This is basically a shortcut. With this terminal, you can interact with the system. You can do things like you can start a program, manage files on the file system, manage process. So maybe I can just show one or two examples here. Start a program. Let's say I have a top command. This basically is a program. Using this, it shows the current processes, the CPU usage, and what are the processes that are running, and things like that. This is one utility or the one application. And with the Q, you can exit the top command. And then the manage file systems. So it's like ls. I can see that this is utility to list the files and folders here. And then cd to, I'll go to documents, and then ls elpa, go here, and then you can see here this is some test files. I can just copy the test.txt to test1.txt. Okay, so here if you see, I have another file that's get created, test1.txt. So this is some basic operation on the copying of file. So similarly, you can do many other commands, which I will be covering in the future episodes. So all that you can do using a command line on the file operations and processes, managing processes, and things like that. So one example of the manage process is the ps command, where it just lists what are the running processes in this instance of shell within this terminal. So we have a bash and then the ps. These are the utilities that are running. Okay, so this is how you can basically interact with this system using this shell. And one more thing with the Linux shell is you can put all the commands, you can group the shell commands into files and then execute them as programs. So for example, I have here listed down different commands. All these commands can be put into a single file and then can be executed as a program. So this also I will cover in the future episodes. So this is about Linux shell. This is very basic information on Linux shell. With this, we will be able to start working on the future episodes, where we learn more about how do we navigate the file system and how do we manage the file system, the files and folders, how do we start different programs, how do we manage processes, and a lot of other stuff that we need to know or basically to work with Linux. So thanks for watching. Please do share and subscribe to the channel.